After teaching us about words and their dangers, and in light of his own admission that everyone makes mistakes, James tells us today that if we want to be wise in our speech, we should pray, because wise speech simply is prayer. We should always speak as though we are speaking with God, and certainly as if God can hear us and God cares about what we are saying. As Christians, we not only should stop and ask, what would Jesus do? We should also be asking ourselves, what does God think about what I'm saying or doing right now? James reminds us that prayer is not just a private matter. Prayer helps shape a particular kind of community where people are committed to each other. The sick call for elders to come and pray over them and anoint them with oil. Sinners are to confess to one another, and the cheerful should sing songs of praise. James might have said, the community that prays together stays together, which is really something if you think about it, given all that divides us. James treats prayer as a treatment for all of the poison in the world, all of the illness and sinfulness, the physicality of our spiritual problems for us and for those around us. Lives lived in prayerful awareness of God's activity in the world are as important to our physical well-being as are any advances in medicine. He tells us we should go in search of those who have been cut off or isolated. And if they can't or won't come to us, then we need to go to them. Barbara Brown Taylor, an Episcopal priest and religion professor, says that there are many ways in which illness and wrongdoing separate people from their community. And we've certainly seen a lot of that evidence of that recently. People may be isolated physically in hospitals or at home or in nursing homes. They may be isolated in prison or shunned by society in their sinfulness. In biblical days, illness was associated with sin. And while in our modern times we don't always think that, well, they have a physical illness because they are sinful people, many who are sick or carry guilt about their illness in our day and time do it because we make them feel that way. Maybe we think to ourselves, they didn't wash their hands enough, get enough exercise. Maybe they ate too much or drank or smoked too much. It's kind of their fault that they are sick. And as evidence that they deserve this illness, they can tell you that there are people who don't come and visit them. And in a way, they feel like they deserve that. That's why those who show up with hot soup or a bouquet of garden flowers or just a friendly smile mean so much. In the case of those who know they have sinned, whether or not they are sick, James recommends confession, not only privately, but also publicly to the community. He's not talking about standing out on a street corner. He means in the community of faith. When we confess in community, we are speaking to those who will also one day be confessing their sins, if they haven't already. And to people who know the power of forgiveness after confession. Instead of looking politely away, James challenges us to look together at our humanity and the mistakes we all make, and to realize our mutual need for God. James ends this book by reminding us of the open-endedness of the world, that the world is still and might always be full of sin and death, and those who wander away. But the wise Christian can, in and through prayer, continue to engage the world in hope for a time when what has splintered can be reunited. James doesn't simply talk about faith issues. He gives us concrete acts of faith to do. Don't talk about it, he says. Do these things. It is in the doing of them that the power of God will change lives. It will change your life and the life of the person that you are reaching out to. The prayer of the righteous, James says, is powerful and effective. He reminds us of the story of Elijah, the powerful prayers that Elijah prayed, who, James emphasizes, was a human being just like we are. We may not feel we're in the same league or even the same species as Elijah, but remember, he had his good days praying for the end of the drought and the rains came, or the life of the widow's son, and the boy lived again. But Elijah also had his bad days under the broom tree, asking God to simply end his life. Not all of our prayers will result in the same dramatic effects that Elijah had. Most of the time, they simply put us in God's presence and remind us that we are loved, whatever the outcome. But don't minimize the power for finding forgiveness and life and hope when the wisdom of God goes head to head with the wisdom of the world. And our world needs that wisdom so much. It needs the humility of knowing we make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and allowing them in ourselves and in others. It needs the practice of being in community together, not because we agree with everything, see everything eye to eye, or even like all the same things, but in a community where we can share joys and concerns. Our world needs the practice of prayer. Prayer that is more than words telling how we feel or what we want or what scares us, but also that time that brings God's healing and forgiveness into our midst. Just this week, I heard about a man who was wrongly accused of something, and the person accusing him did not give him a chance to answer for himself or to tell his side of the story. The accuser was so frightened or so angry or so fearful that he set a trap for him, got what he thought was evidence, and then beat him up. Then he called the police and he pressed charges. The police came, and the first thing they had to do was take the innocent man to the hospital, where it took several hours to treat his wounds. Then they took him to jail. And soon everyone in the community was hearing about what happened and giving their opinion, again, without knowing all the facts. Social media stepped in. Some praised the accuser for his swift action. Some said, even if the man had done something, he didn't deserve to be beaten right there on the spot. This is America, not Iran. This is why we have courts and a justice system. The evidence turned out to be nothing. The man was released from prison and sent home to continue recovering from his wounds. That will take some weeks, not to mention the emotional wounds he must continue to endure because of the trauma. Not just the physical trauma, but being accused of something, being thought to be a certain kind of person that he isn't. And because even though he is innocent, there are some who will always believe and always claim he got away with it. Hearing about this situation, after spending several days studying about the kind of community that James encourages us to have, has affected me very deeply. This is a world that cries out for prayer and humility and grace and forgiveness and the practice of being together, for putting God's way ahead of our way. A man's life will never be the same, all because someone acted like Rambo and was saving the world, he thought, all by himself, outside of community. The kind of community that James tells us to practice here together in this place, and then to take it out into the world and practice it there together in community. To God be the glory forever. Amen.